Thank you very much. I'm really pleased to see that on Friday afternoon, after everybody's exhausted from hopefully a productive week, you're actually here to listen to an ex-history teacher talk to you about IT. It's true, I actually was a history teacher in 16, 15, 14-year-olds, and then at university. And I never studied IT, and while I live CI/CD and DevOps in the trenches every day, I live in fear that somebody is going to look down at their list and say, "Ooh, you're not a computer technician. Give us back your mouse." However, what a history education did provide for me is the ability to look at problems and methodologies over time to spot what happens, what kind of trends influence our way of thinking. So I'm going to be mixing up a little bit of history here. I can see there's some people with the same amount of gray hair as I have, so you'll remember some of the things I actually talk about. And like a good history teacher, there will be a quiz in the middle of this. Okay, there's a quiz, so everybody's going to have to pay attention, and I will give you a chance to win something in the quiz. So, let me begin a little bit. When I try to apply historical methodologies or historical analysis to software development, I come up with some answers or some questions that many computer technicians don't actually come up with. And when I look at something, if I were to walk into this room and see quality transformation written up on a board, my first question would be, what do you mean by that? What's quality? And quality is one of those unusual words that's usually described in the negative. Oh, it has really bad quality. Oh, there's a lot of bugs. Our quality is not so good. Quality is not what it used to be. Remember back in the 90s when software was really good? Yeah? Anybody who ever used Lotus Notes in the 1990s remembers what I'm talking about. Yeah, hands go up in the back. Thank you. So, for us today, I'm going to define quality because I'm the history teacher. I'm going to define it the way I want to define it. And we'll use this as a working definition for today, and you can argue with me afterwards. So, quality for me means deploying a product to production in terms of time and money, in the way that satisfies all the stakeholders' expectations, especially the customer. So, the final product does what we expect it to do, and it does it in the way we expect it to do it. That's what quality is. And that means not just the product, but the way that the product gets delivered. And for that, we have people who will say to us, there's really only two ways, and they're extremes, to develop software. You either design and build something perfect, and that's the Apollo guidance computer, in case anybody doesn't recognize it. NASA sent men into space and to the moon, landed on the moon and brought them back safely with that. And they spent a lot of time testing that. And they brought everybody that they sent to the moon back safely with that small thing. Took a lot of time, took a lot of testing, took a lot of money, but they got it right. So one extreme is build it perfectly from the start, make sure it works, because once it's out somewhere on the other side of the moon, you're never going to be able to fix it. The other extreme that people argue about or say, you have to build something and then deal with the quality at the end. There's a problem with that as well. I'll be in Italy tomorrow, actually, and I will ask the Italian software developers that I meet what they think about that. The problem is here, quality assurance has to be managed from the start. In many cases, what we have in software development is not quality assurance, we have quality control. People do testing at the end. End-to-end testing, they say. What does that mean? I don't know. I think it's just testing at the end. And they want to pretend it's end-to-end testing. That's quality control. Those tests that you do at the end, after the software is built, after you've built this, That's inspection testing. And our inspection testing with that one would probably fail. Now, what do? You have to go back and get developers to do it again if you do your testing at the end. But testing is only one part of quality assurance. Quality assurance is actually managed from the start, from the idea. It is evaluated, improved up to and beyond the delivery date. You all know about continuous improvement and continuous development and continuous testing. Now, last night, as it turned out, I'm working for a company right now helping them on their DevOps journey. They're really committed to DevOps, and by that they mean the developers are responsible for their own releases. They're responsible for their own quality and their own products. And last night we had a pizza and beer party to celebrate a release. Think about that. If in some companies when I worked at CI/CD groups where we did massive numbers of releases, if we had a pizza and beer party, we'd be drinking beer at 10 o'clock in the morning. Okay, fine if you're in Bavaria, but for continued software development, that's probably not the idea. And you can't eat pizza 600, 700 times a day. So if you're doing releases, well, okay, maybe you could, but you wouldn't want to. If you're doing releases on a continual basis, a pizza and beer party for a release doesn't make any sense. Now, I've worked for some other companies where if we relied on the frequency of releases before we got fed, we would starve to death, literally. It would be a year between pizzas. So, quality assurance, I'm going to talk about quality assurance and managing it from the start. Essentially, quality assurance is making sure at every step of the development process that we are watching out for and managing what we are going to deliver and meeting the expectations of all the stakeholders. We'll keep coming back to that. Now, a lot of people describe a development life cycle in a circle, and just to be completely different, I do it as an infinity loop because it makes sense. But in this particular case, if you look at, I've chosen release planning, coding, continuous builds, documentation, deployment, operations. I have not put testing in there anywhere. I have what's called a Phoenix review. And the Phoenix review is the idea, some people call it a root cause analysis, but a root cause analysis sort of implies that something went wrong. A Phoenix review is like the bird that crashed and burned, and from the ashes you have to rebuild it and figure out what happened and come back to the developers so that you can continuously improve. The faster your cycle, the better you are. So you're working your way through a cycle. In essence, this is release orchestration. You're orchestrating your releases, okay? Making sure that all of the right stakeholders are involved, that things are being done according to what you want to build. Now that, if you're working through rapidly, in rapid iterations, what you want to build will probably change, but that's not a problem because you just keep reevaluating it. So, what is release orchestration? Well, release orchestration is the evolution of what we used to call release management. It's automated release management. Release management used to be, and some of you will probably remember this, 6 or 7 people all went into a room, a war room, for about 5 days right before the release, worked their butts off, got the release out, and then had a pizza and beer party, right? That's what it used to be. Some places that still is. Many places something like that still is. So I think that release orchestration is actually a logical evolution of automated release management. In this, we talk about tools and best practices. You have to integrate all of your workflows. And you have to change the mindset and skills. Now, changing the mindset of people is a cultural challenge. And the move to DevOps is a cultural change. And as a historian, one of the things that I always was most interested in is how do people change their minds? as a DevOps manager and CI/CD specialist, I know that that is the hardest part of any DevOps transformation, any quality transformation, is getting people to change their minds. That is just really hard. If somebody is convinced of something, they will just stick with that. Mark Twain, the American author, said, "I'm all for progress, but it's change that I fear." And it's very difficult to have progress without change. So these three things, tools, workflow, mindset, will lead us to a better, faster software development lifecycle. And the DevOps process, what I'm calling the process of moving to DevOps, is the full realization of the promise of continuous delivery. I don't think I've said anything right now that anybody will disagree with. That'll come in a couple of minutes. So let's look at the first one I said, tools. Now, tools. We have lots of different tools, and I pulled out a whole bunch of different things, Kubernetes, Ansible, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think I left Prometheus out and Grafana and all that. Tools don't matter. You have to get the tools working together. In other words, they have to be orchestrated with one another. But what tools you use doesn't really matter. I could build an entire operating system. I'm not capable of it, but I could build an operating system with a VI editor if I wanted to. And in fact, probably Linus Torvalds did build the first kernels with a VI editor. Who knows? You will notice here, there's an interesting one. The release orchestration up at the top, Excel. Yeah. It shocks me. You would be surprised by how many companies still use an Excel spreadsheet and send it around to coordinate their releases. Okay, it is a tool. It works to a certain extent. It will not work when you try to move to a microservices platform architecture. It just won't work. But in any case, here we have all of our tools. And the point is about tools, it doesn't matter what tools you use, but they have to work together. And the tools should make transparency possible. Now, the second one is workflows. And the piece of workflows that I think is most important is actually the feedback loops. And the feedback loops here are shown in orange. And what I've done is I've taken a generic workflow, and in fact, one that I've actually built in some company, and walked through some of the tools that we used in this. And what's important here is the communication feedback loops. So every piece of information that comes from one of your tools feeds back to a place where everybody can get it. And it's very important that everybody can see all of the information at every step of the process. Now, just for this is just a feedback loop inside the software development part. It doesn't include the peripheral things. We'll get to that in a minute. But what's important is here that your transparency exists, that you really practice transparency. You can't have results of your builds that the product group can't see. Yeah, but it's not important. It's only a development release. Or no, you don't have any rights to look on the development branch of my Git. I mean, that's just crazy. If you don't want somebody to change it, that's fine. That's a different story. But everybody should be able to see it. So transparency exists. And the third one, it comes back to our mindset. Now, wrapping your mind around this is rather difficult. It's even more difficult for middle-level managers, because middle-level managers will quickly... Oh, I should have probably asked, who's a middle-level manager in here? Okay, you're outnumbered. Good. So, I told you I was going to say something controversial. So, middle-level managers don't like this. Well, middle-level managers who are not progressive and not thinking don't like this. The reason they don't like this is because as you improve the efficiency of your release orchestration and release cycle, they realize they don't have anything to do anymore. Before, they were coordinating. Okay. I'm going to get questions at the end, I think. So they were coordinating perhaps the war room that put the release people together to get a release out the door. They ordered the pizza and the beer. They, in this, don't have much to do. But what they have to do is they have to change what their role is and what they're doing. And I'll show you how in just a couple of minutes. So in this, we come back to, I didn't put testing in the first one. Now I have put testing in. Because testing happens everywhere. If you're a real developer, you know that you write your APIs and your tests before you write your code, right? And everybody practices that. How many developers practice that? I mean, really, come on. Oh. Wow. Yeah, it's a testing conference. Oh, boy. Okay. Good. Congratulations. Testing happens everywhere. Also, security and scanning. Security and monitoring. Again, all of this information has to feed back and be transparent. So, transparency is accepted even by middle-level managers. Everybody has to understand that all of the information, the results of your test, the results of your chaos monkey tests that are running in production, the results of your builds, everything has to be visible to everybody. And you move toward a mindset that can accept a change. So, the methodology wars are all over. We have DevOps and SRE, we have infrastructure as code, extreme and pair programming, continuous integration and delivery, production testing, Kubernetes, containers. We won. We won the methodology war. DevOps beat waterfall hands down. We won, right? There is a lack of practical working definition in what quality means. I started this all off by saying what I thought quality meant, but if you take 10 QA testers and put them in a room together, you'll come back with 15 or 20 different answers. There's a lack of a definition of what quality means. There are a lack of quality measurements. How do we measure quality? What does it actually mean? Is it quality because all my tests passed? Or my favorite one, this is a bug-free release. We have 0 bugs. I love that one because what I often see is right before the release, and I've seen this so many times it makes me ill. Right before the release, all of the bugs get switched to features. It's a bug-free release, and then afterwards they get put as bugs so they can maintain the contract. That's not right. That's not fair. Lack of measurements lead to that. There's a lack of understanding by senior and project management that quality is on target. So many times leaders, software development heads of departments have come to me and said, you know, I wish I could find out what the quality of my software is going to be or the release schedule is going to be a little bit more than a week and a half before the release. Because they get green, 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 everything's fine. Every single sprint, everything's green. And then at the end, they say, oh, we're not going to make it. Managers don't have enough visibility on the progress of that infinity loop and the development. There's inadequate use of reviews and inspections. We always talk about this Phoenix review or root cause analysis or ending each sprint with a retrospective. And when we're out of time, that's the first thing that gets dropped. What did we learn? We don't learn. We continue to make the same mistakes in the next sprint. Inadequate defect prevention, because as we all know, this is Agile testing days. We're all testers, or we all done testing. Testing is not there to find bugs. It's there to prevent bugs. So we have inadequate prevention detection. Inefficient or careless testing. Now, okay, many of you here are testers, but I think you know what I'm talking about. The flaky test is a great example. That test that gives you one result 9 times out of 10, and then one time it gives you 1. Do you find out where it is? You struggle through? Do you dig deep dive into there? Or do you turn it off? This is a big problem. Inefficient or careless testing. Excessive scheduling pressure leads to unwise attempts to shortcut quality control. That means simply that we are in a big rush. We have to get it out the door. Get it out the door. Just turn those bugs into features. and then we'll fix it later. Or, don't worry, once we do this release, we're going to come with a 1.1 right afterwards, and we'll do that. Now, is there any one of those things, including this last one, unstable or ambiguous user requirements, that you have not seen recently? Is there any one? Are those valid? Are those valid today? I think most people can agree that we have those valid. Okay. I call this, however, historical attention span deficit disorder. Okay? That's actually a real term, but this is what this is. And here's your quiz. Here's your quiz. In what year were all 8 of those points written? Now, as an incentive here, I'm going to give a gift away. A friend of mine wrote a book called Software Design X-Rays, Adam Thornhill. He talks about paying down technical debt and how to pay technical debt in this. It's an excellent book. It came out in March of 2018, and he said it was all right if I gave away one as a gift to anybody who could answer the question. So just to go back here, all of those, what year were they written? Somebody want to give it a try?
1993.
Absolutely, 1993. Those were written in 1993. And they were written by a professor named Capers Jones in, no, so wait a minute a second. Are you a developer or a tester? Tester? Good, you'll like that. You can dig through and find your top technical debt and your highest risk code, and then you can build your inspection testing based on that. So you can do your intrusive manual testing based on the biggest problems in your code base. Okay, thank you. So he wrote this in 1993, and we struggle with each of those problems today. Now, so a view from the past. He wrote, "It is hoped that US companies can overcome their cultural resistance and improve their software management capabilities." That is very, very important. Their cultural, he recognized that it was cultural resistance that was causing this problem in 1993, and we still see these problems in 2018. That is a quarter of a century later, we still see the same problems. Why do we see the same problems? He also wrote, hopefully, software quality will be under control by the end of 1999. Okay, so this just proved that he didn't have a crystal ball, but some things have changed since 1993, however. We have recognized that processes in software management have adapted and have changed. It is actually happening in many companies. Not all companies in 1993 were aware of their problems or even trying to fix them. Many companies today are aware of the problems and trying to fix them. Organizations are evolving. We actually have organizations that are practicing things in a positive, proactive way. And this is important. We have valued assets that have now expanded to include competencies. That means that the assets of a company are no longer just how many buildings it has, or how many trucks, or how many cars, but it's also competencies. And included in those competencies is software development. Software development becomes an asset. This is called an intangible asset, and I'll get to that in just a second. So I want to look at those three things in order: processes, organization, and assets. Processes, how many of you have ever done a value stream mapping at your company? So you're aware of this concept. Okay, a value stream map, for those of you who haven't done it, is a relatively simple process by which you map out all the steps that it takes to get a piece of software from idea to production. You find out how long each of those takes, that's at the top, and you find out how much time is wasted in between those steps on the bottom, and that's waste. So you have value at the top and waste at the bottom, and I've just listed a couple of things. The problem with this, partly, is What happens between the Phoenix review and planning? How much time takes place, does that take? You've often seen where you'll release something into production, it'll start to accumulate bugs, and that information doesn't make it back in a timely manner to the people at the beginning who then redesign how you're going to fix it. They just start to fix bugs, and they don't really give a lot of thought into how it's going to fit into the next release. This problem is actually part of our solution. We talk about delivery pipelines, and when you hear the word pipeline, you think just like this. A pipe goes in one end, comes out the other. If we change the mindset a little bit and start to think of it as a circle or an infinity loop, we realize that this is not really a pipeline, this is a process. This is a process of continually fixing things. And if you look here, the area that interests me the most is that area right there. Getting the information back in a timely feedback loop to the people who do the planning. That could be developers, it could be PO people, it could be lots of things. So, value stream mapping 2.0, just because everybody calls it 2.0, I just call it 2.0. So, I came up with this. I don't know if it's an original idea, probably not, but it looks cool. In this, we see the flow in the way it really is, and I spot my problem right there. Everything else was exactly the same as it was on that flat pipeline, but here I can identify that I've got a 4-week delay between information that went in or came out of the Phoenix review, if you did one, and before it got back into planning. And this highlights a particular problem in our software development lifecycle. And that problem is that software development is not about software developers and testers. The software development lifecycle has to include, obviously, product owners. The product owner here is in a color white. Why? Because the product owner usually works for somebody else. You have the software division, maybe the QA division is part of the software division, but that product guy or that product woman, they report up to a different VP. And that VP has a completely different set of priorities than the head of development. And they don't like each other much. And that often happens because they're constantly trying to do things that are generally opposed to what the other one wants. Oversimplified, operations people and product people want stability and accountability and planning, the ability to plan. And developers want new features, right? They want to innovate, put new tools. Yeah, but I can put this on Kubernetes. Great. That is a fundamental problem, and that has to be addressed in some way. And one of the ways to do that is to point out to the development groups and the product owner groups just where they're wasting time. Now, if you extend this out just a little bit more, you actually have potentially finance, your leadership team. Sometimes, oftentimes, the QA test team reports to somebody completely different than the head of development. So in this particular case, all of your stakeholders that I talked about earlier are now extending across those silos that the companies build. And companies have built a model that has worked for a relatively long time. Companies have been around for several centuries, and they've developed this. But silos emerge. Partly silos emerge because people want control of their own area. But silos also emerged in the 1990s because that was the corporate paradigm. So we extend past those walls. So now we come to the second point, which is organizations. Organizations historically. In 2014, an anthropologist, or I think he's an anthropologist sociologist, named Frederick Laloux, wrote a book about exactly this. And what he said was, just like human development, corporations are going through the same sorts of transitions, but at a slightly different speed. So he divided them up into nice, easily understood color codes, and he said, when humans developed inside their society, they started out with the strongman idea. So this is the red. This is the one that was first. So the strongest person in the group took over. They did it. You still see this, actually, with a wolf pack, for example, or the mafia. Yeah, it's one person. When that person, the capo is gone, all hell breaks loose underneath. The Mexican cartels are also like that. So then we move to a conformist, tradition-driven. Tradition-driven introduced the concept of hierarchies with changeable heads. So the Catholic Church, the army. You remove the top general, you remove the pope, another one comes in and replaces it. But it's tradition-driven, everybody follows it because there is a hierarchy that's understood and accepted. And then we come to what we have seen over the past let's call it 50 to 75 years, which is success-driven corporations, meritocracies. Do your best, you'll get ahead, you'll move ahead. Middle-level managers, raise your hands again. Yeah, this is what middle-level managers were taught 25 or 30 years ago. You do really well in this meritocracy, you'll move up. Okay. And by the way, go ahead and build your 200-person team so that you can become a vice president as well. So success-driven. This is command and control on the what and freedom on the how. So it's a combination of the hierarchical structure with a freedom on how you do it. Don't tell me how you're going to do it, just get it done. But I'm going to make sure that you listen to what I say in getting it done. You can decide how, but I'm going to tell you the what. He's argued now that many companies are making a shift to the green and insists the green is culture-driven. And this insists that all perspectives deserve equal respect. That doesn't mean that all opinions are equally valid, but you have to listen to them and hear them. Now, think back to one slide ago where I said the vice president of finance and the vice president of product and the vice president of engineering don't get along. Well, in a culture-driven company, that is part of their objective. They have to work together. And we do see many companies like this, in this green. He's then gone on to propose that the next level of evolution inside companies will be something which is teal. And in teal, he says it's going to be relationship-driven. We'll see. Capers-Jones didn't get that 1999 thing right, so maybe Frederic Laloux doesn't have this teal thing. In any case, what we do see, and what is true, is this orange and green transition. We are now in a transition of companies from primarily orange, and you all know who they are, to primarily green. And you probably can guess who they are. So, the evolution of organizations is mirroring the evolution of society. So I'll come to the last piece, and this is probably the most important piece for this talk. The nature of corporate investment, as I said, has been shifting toward intangible assets. An intangible asset is the value derived for a company based on its processes, the efficiency of its work, and not on the tangible assets, the buildings it owns, etc. In the 1990s, Microsoft shifted from being a primarily tangible asset-driven company to an intangible asset company. Their financial records switched. Intangible assets were actually more valuable than tangible assets. In the 2000s, most of the countries of Europe had also made this transition where intangible assets were greater than tangible assets. This is really important to understand. And Germany finally, in 2013, made it. So now the value of German companies' intangible assets is greater than the value of German companies' tangible assets. Now that's saying something since we have many major auto manufacturers here who calculate differently. But they are realizing there is a value in the processes by which they operate. Products and processes are one of their greatest assets, and for any company doing software, and that is most companies nowadays, this is an important message for them to get. Now, a DevOps process, like release orchestration, goes from being an operational cost, and you've all argued this. We don't have enough money to implement DevOps right now. We don't have the time to do this right now. This can't be done because we don't have the budget. We don't have the time. But if DevOps process and release orchestration is no longer an operational cost, but it's now an intangible asset, then any value you derive from a DevOps process goes straight into the balance sheet. And you have to work to convince managers of this. The finance people may already understand this, and they may actually be calculating the intangible assets of the company, but they may not know about DevOps. So, the challenges that remain, we have still, and I'm going to pull selectively from that list that I had, we have a lack of quality measurements. We have insufficient and careless testing, and we have excessive scheduling pressure. These are three things that still haunt most development organizations inside companies. These are still three things that haunt us. However, if you take these three things and argue those to your board, to your boss, amongst yourselves, or even convince yourself that these things are actually assets, intangible assets that will help the company, then suddenly the argumentation for attacking them and the argumentation for actually trying to fix them changes. One of the problems that we have in software development, and I think most of you hopefully will agree, one of the problems is that we are having a difficult time changing the minds of all of the stakeholders to get them to understand that quality has to be part and parcel of the process. Release orchestration, which is the automated evolution of release management, is a process that has to be taken seriously by the company. In other words, the company has to invest in it, and you have to make that better. And your quality processes, your development processes, are all valuable to the company. Finally, we have this bear bug, unstable and ambiguous customer requirements. I would argue that in that one, in the majority of cases, the problem comes from that artificial split between product and the software development lifecycle. We're doing a great job of getting that software development lifecycle out fast. Testing is automated. Development is automated. We can do 16, 20, 1,000 releases per day. But the problem is, because we have this division, this wall between product and development, and between finance and the leadership team, etc., because we have these artificial walls, our process falls down. Our process can only be as fast as the slowest component in our process. Think back to the value stream map. It can only be as fast as the slowest piece. So when we say that we're going to improve the release orchestration process or improve the quality process, the software development lifecycle, we have to understand that this is not just software developers. This is not just software developers and testers. It's great that they're getting along these days, but it's far more than that. And we have to stop seeing the product people as the enemy. I mean, that's really easy to do. But next to sales, they're the absolute worst. But we have to stop seeing them as the enemy and include them in our process. So, just to wrap this up and bring you back, the release orchestration is the full realization on the promise of continuous delivery, continuous improvement, and quality. And the evolution of process organizations and understanding of assets is something that we have to actually understand. If we understand this within the software development group and the testing groups and the product groups, then we can bring this into the rest of the company. Inclusive. Inclusive release orchestration is the only way that we're actually going to make a difference, and we're going to improve the quality of our products. Thank you very much for your attention.